Hello and welcome to my video all about open cables, which are also sometimes called travelling cables. This type of cable is one step up from the type of cable I've shown you how to knit so far. And that's because it incorporates the background stitches into the cable. And that's what an open cable is. It's a cable that has the background stitches included in the cable itself. So far in my videos, I've only shown you how to do straight up and down cables that form columns. And in those patterns, the cable strands only wrap around each other. In open cables, however, those strands don't just twist around each other. They are also taken over the top of the background stitches, and that's the important difference. What this means is that in open cables, there are background stitches between the cable strands. And this opens up a whole world of possibility, because the cable strands can travel all across your knitting. They're not just limited to going up and down in columns in your knitting. The other advantage of having background stitches in between the strands is that it helps the strands to pop out from your knitting more and make them look more defined. Okay, so now I've explained what an open cable is, I'm now going to demonstrate one. As you can see, I've already cast on my stitches and done one repeat of this pattern. The design is a simple twist between two cable strands, and in between are circles of the background stitch, which is reverse stockinette stitch. This is a 12-row pattern repeat, and I've cast on 13 stitches to give me a couple of reverse stockinette stitches either side of the cable. For row number 1, which represents the wrong side or the back of the knitting, we first need to knit 4 stitches. Then the yarn comes to the front for 2 purl stitches, to the back for 1 knit stitch, to the front for 2 purl stitches, and to the back for 4 knit stitches. What we're doing in this row is establishing the pattern. So anywhere we've just done a knit stitch is going to be reverse stockinette, and anywhere we've just done a purl stitch is going to be stockinette, i.e. the cable strands. Row number 2 represents the right side or the front of the knitting, and we begin with 4 purl stitches. This is the row where the cable strands meet and cross over each other. We then take our cable needle and slip the next 3 stitches purlwise onto it. We then leave the cable needle at the back behind the knitting. Then, making sure that the working yarn is at the back, you do 2 knit stitches. Then bring the yarn to the front and purl a stitch off the cable needle. So slide the stitches to the right hand side of the cable needle and do a purl stitch. Then take the working yarn to the back and do 2 knit stitches off the cable needle. If you find it too fiddly to knit or purl off the cable needle, you can instead slip the stitches back onto the left hand needle before you then knit or purl them. To do this, you slip the stitches from the left hand side of the cable needle back onto the left hand needle, in the same order in which they were first removed. Then put the cable needle to one side, bring the yarn forward and do 4 purl stitches to finish the row. Then for row number 3, we do exactly the same as we did for row number 1. So I'm just going to put the pattern for that up on screen now. And then we're on to row number 4, which begins with 3 purl stitches. We're then going to do a cable, which for simplicity's sake, I'm going to refer to as a back cross, even though technically it's more likely to be referred to as a C3B or 2/1 RC. What these basically mean is that the cable is worked over 3 stitches. It's a back cross or right leaning cable, and it involves passing 2 knit stitches over the front of 1 purl stitch. So you take your cable needle and you slip 1 stitch purlwise onto it. And then leave the cable needle at the back behind your knitting. Just bear in mind that this is a reverse stockinette stitch or a background stitch that you've just put on the cable needle. Then, making sure that the working yarn is at the back, do 2 knit stitches. Because this is row number 4, i.e. an even numbered row, we're currently knitting the front or right side of the knitting. So therefore these 2 knit stitches are creating stockinette stitch, which is what the strands of the cable are made of. So basically what you're doing here is passing the 2 knit stitches of the cable strand over the top of a reverse stockinette background stitch, which we're now going to purl off the cable needle. So make sure the yarn is at the front, and then purl that stitch off the cable needle. This has twisted a right leaning cable strand over 1 background stitch. And that's how open cables are formed, by incorporating background stitches. We then do 1 purl stitch. Now we're going to do another cable, and for simplicity's sake I'm going to refer to it as a front cross. Technically you're more likely to see it referred to as a C3F or a 2/1 LC. What this means is that it's a front cross or left leaning cable, and again it's worked across 3 stitches, with 2 knit stitches being twisted over the top of 1 purl stitch. So to do this we take our cable needle and we slip 2 stitches purlwise onto it. We then keep this cable needle at the front of our knitting. When the cable needle is held at the front like this, whatever's on that cable needle will be the stitches that are being carried over the top of other stitches. So in this case, making sure that the working yarn is at the front, we do 1 purl stitch. So this stitch is going behind the stitches on the cable needle. Then we make sure the working yarn is at the back and we knit the 2 stitches off the cable needle. Since the 2 knit stitches represent the stockinette stitch of the cable strand, what we've now done is taken that cable strand over the top of 1 background stitch, and now that twist is complete. We then purl 3 stitches to finish the row. Next it's row number 5, which we begin with 3 knit stitches. We then bring the yarn to the front for 2 purl stitches, to the back for 3 knit stitches, to the front for 2 purl stitches, and to the back for 3 knits. Then for row number 6 we start with 2 purl stitches. This row represents where the cable strands reach their outermost points, so they're not going to get more spaced out than they will be after this row. So we now do a back cross cable. To do this we slip 1 stitch purlwise onto our cable needle and leave it at the back. We then do 2 knit stitches, which represents the 2 stitches of the cable strand. We then bring the yarn to the front and purl the stitch off the cable needle. That purl stitch represents a background stitch. Then we do 3 purl stitches. Then we do a front cross cable. So we slip 2 stitches purlwise onto the cable needle and leave the needle at the front. Then we purl 1 stitch. Then we take the working yarn to the back and knit the 2 stitches off the cable needle. Then, making sure that the yarn is at the front, we purl 2 stitches to finish the row. For row number 7, we first knit 2 stitches. Then we bring the yarn to the front for 2 purl stitches. Then the yarn goes to the back for 5 knit stitches. Then to the front for 2 purl stitches. And to the back for 2 knits. Then for row 8, it's 2 purls, 2 knits, 5 purls, 2 knits, and 2 purls. Then row 9 is the same as row 7, so I'm just going to put the pattern for that row up on screen now. Then for row 10, we start with 2 purl stitches. We then do a front cross cable. Previously, we'd been doing back cross cables at the start of the cable rows, but now we're doing the front cross cables at the start of the rows, because now we're bringing the cable strands inwards. So that means that the cable strand that was leaning left now has to lean right, and the cable strand that was leaning right now has to start leaning left. So to do that, you slip 2 stitches purlwise onto the cable needle and keep the cable needle at the front. Then with the yarn at the front, you purl 1. Then you take the yarn back and knit the 2 stitches off the cable needle. You then bring the yarn to the front and do 3 purl stitches. Then we do a back cross cable. So we slip 1 stitch purlwise onto the cable needle and keep the cable needle at the back. We then do 2 knit stitches. Then bring the yarn to the front and purl the stitch off the cable needle. Then you finish the row with 2 purl stitches. And then row number 11 is as follows: 3 knit stitches, 2 purls, 3 knits, 2 purls, and 3 knits. Then the final row, row number 12, begins with 3 purl stitches. Then we do a front cross, so slip 2 stitches and hold to the front. Then purl 1, then knit 2 off the cable needle. Then with the yarn at the front, we purl one. Then we do a back cross. So we slip one to the cable needle and hold it at the back. Then we knit two and then purl one off the cable needle. And finally, we purl 3 stitches. And that's it, that's the pattern completed. So now you just repeat rows 1 to 12 as many times as you want. As you can see, one repeat makes a circular cable with reverse stockinette within the cable and also outside of it. For comparison purposes, I've also done a couple of repeats in a lower weight yarn, as you can see here. And it just makes the effect more compact. I really hope you've enjoyed this introduction to open cables, and thank you very much for watching.